that product management is like playing battleship. So you have a grid, you choose like A2, and you throw a bomb, let's say, and you see whether you hit a ship or if you hit the water. So if you hit the water, you keep on looking for opportunities. But if you hit something and it doesn't sink, you know that there's something bigger there. So you can continue exploring the problem space and throwing the bombs like very closely, because you know that there's going to be something bigger that is worth chasing.
Ciao, io sono Marco Imperato e questo è il podcast di ProductTank. ProductTank è il punto di riferimento in Italia per il product management. Finora abbiamo aiutato oltre 180.000 persone tramite master, formazioni in azienda, guide, articoli e meetup. Lo facciamo anche attraverso questo podcast in cui intervisto product leader che spaccano e che potranno darti tantissimi consigli utili per migliorare il tuo modo di costruire, lanciare e muovere le metriche del tuo prodotto. Oggi sono con Guido Lonetti, che è Lead Product Manager in N26. Guido è appassionato di fintech, marketplace growth e di come scalare le product organization. Inoltre Guido è co-organizzatore di uno dei meetup per product manager più grandi al mondo e che si tiene a Barcellona. Con Guido parliamo di product discovery, quindi di come partire da zero, di come organizzare team e gestire backlog, di dual track, spike, di come ridurre il rischio e quando capire che si hanno abbastanza evidenze. Insomma, un sacco di cose super interessanti e alcune abbastanza tecniche, per cui ti consiglio assolutamente di ascoltare l'episodio di oggi. Prima di iniziare però, se ancora non l'avessi fatto, ti chiedo di lasciarci una review a 5 stelle sulla piattaforma su cui ci stai ascoltando. Questo ci aiuterà a raggiungere ancora più utenti e a diffondere più velocemente la cultura di prodotto in Italia, che poi è la nostra missione. Adesso non mi resta che augurarti buon ascolto e ricordarti che dopo i tempi duri vengono sempre tempi eroici. Hi Guido, welcome to Product Heroes.
Hi Marco, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. So let's start right now with your story. So what's your path, your background, and maybe the most important experience for you?
Well, I am Argentinian, even if my name shows that I'm Italian, Guido Lonetti. I don't speak very good Italian. I studied business management in Buenos Aires. I got into product management probably by accident, like most of the product managers, I would say. Since then, I worked in different industries, business models. I studied in news and media. I moved to marketplaces, classifieds, video streaming, restaurant reservations. For the last 3.5 years, I've been working in the fintech space, which I find very appealing. It's been a ride of 15 years in the product management world, I would say.
So you did a lot of things, but why do you find the fintech industry so interesting?
It's quite interesting, Marco, for several reasons. For example, if you take classifieds have been disrupted with the first internet, right? So I would say like 1999, 2000, there were already really good classified businesses. Then the streaming wars started maybe more like 2010. That's when TV got disrupted. But I believe that the industries, the more inefficient they are and the more pain points they generate for the users, they tend to be disrupted first. But fintech took a little more of time, and I always try to understand why it took more time. And I believe it's because of regulations. It's a highly regulated industry, and therefore, being a PM in that space, it's very difficult because everything that we do needs to be within the regulations. You cannot deliver something that it's an MVP, but it's not compliant. It has to be fully compliant. And I think that that's the big challenge. There are years and years of inefficiency, and that's why I think there's a big room for innovation in the space.
So maybe this is why you like being a PM, because you talked a lot about disruption. And maybe you are in the right place, but how did you choose the PM path? So why PMing among all other different opportunities and possibilities?
Actually, it's a funny story because when I was like 14 years old, my parents bought our first computer back there in Argentina. I built an MP3 search engine website. It had a decent amount of traffic. If I recall correctly, The technology I used was ASP, that was Microsoft proprietary. I remember that I started monetizing the website through affiliate marketing programs. I started receiving checks like $100, $200. I was 14 years old, right? So my mother...
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. I felt I was rich. And when my mother realized that I was receiving these payment checks, she freaked out and she asked me to close the website. So fast forward to the moment I had to choose what to study, and I wanted to continue my way into building software, but I didn't want to actually code the software. I didn't find that like my career path, and I wanted to work on the strategy side, but at that time I didn't know the different roles that work at a tech company, and that's why I got into business management. And eventually I landed on my first job on a digital newspaper when I was 20. And I remember that my boss told me, "You're going to be a product owner." And that's how it all began.
Great, congratulations. So you're currently product lead at N26. That, by the way, it's like it changed completely the way in which I manage my money. I discovered the platform a few years ago, before you were talking about inefficiency. Every time I used to my old bank app, I used to say, it's less painful to go to the bank and do the queue with all the other people that using the native app of my past bank. So at the same time, it should be a lot challenging to run product like MVP, discovery, experimentation in a very like compliant needed world. So what I'm asking is, how are you organized? So what's your team structure? How do you manage your team? How many people?
You're reminding me of a metric that we always mention at N26, because there was a study run through millennials. It was actually checked that 9 out of 10 millennials prefer to go to the dentist rather than going to their bank branch. So imagine how painful the experience it is, right? Circling back to the question of how my team is organized, within N26, there's a domain called financial empowerment, where we are looking for opportunities to empower customers to get money or to make the most out of their money, right? Within that domain, I'm leading the investments group. And right now, there are two teams. One is addressing crypto, and the second one is working and focused on more traditional securities and ETFs. There's two PMs, one leading each of the teams, and each PM work with an engineering team. They have their researchers, UX designers, data analysts. So
Okay, so today we are talking about product discovery. And one guy that actually is Argentinian is Mike Carruego, that used to be the vice president of product at Pronto Pro. Now he moved close to you in Barcelona. He told that product discovery is what separates project management from product management. But let's say you had to explain to someone what product discovery is, and this someone is like the typical like CEO that believes that in the Steve Jobs approach in his winning ideas, and then he has the right things in mind to do, and people ask just to deliver. What would you say to explain to him what product discovery is and why he has to go through it?
I think that the easiest way to explain this is with an example. Let's say that you're the founder of a startup. What would you prefer? Spending 6 months or 12 months building a complete suite solution that doesn't solve any customer problems? Or would you rather build an MVP in 1 month that has been validated by your target customers, and therefore you ensure that it solves at least their core needs? Then you can keep on iterating on top of it. But at the moment that you reach those 6 months that I mentioned, or 12 months, you have a product that you already validated several times. In some kind of way, it reminds me of a friend of mine. He said that product management is like playing Battleship. You know the game Battleship, right? So you have a grid, you choose like A2, and you throw a bomb, let's say, and you see whether you hit a ship or if you hit the water. So if you hit the water, you keep on looking for opportunities. But if you hit something and it doesn't sink, you know that there's something bigger there. So you can continue exploring the problem space and throwing the bombs like very closely, because you know that there's going to be something bigger that is worth chasing.
I think I'm gonna use this metaphor for the Italian people that are listening to us. Battleship is battaglia navale.
Exactly. In Spanish, it's batalla naval. But in any case, being more like from a more theoretical approach, product discovery is an evidence-informed process of reducing uncertainty as you find problems that are worth solving, so to say. I like a way of mentioning what product discovery is, right? So it's finding which is the right product to build, whereas the product delivery is ensuring you're building the product right. It's kind of a game with words, but it's like, again, product discovery is finding the right product to build, whereas product delivery is building the product right. The issue with the waterfall approach is that you inherently assume that you know from the beginning what you need to build to make sure that you'll make an impact. And that's very rarely the case, right? So even if you have a winning idea, there are multiple ways of implementing it. Product discovery will help you to identify the most effective, efficient ways of building your product, taking into account customer feedback, desires, and needs. I organize product meetups. There was one meetup back in Buenos Aires which was really, really interesting. And the speaker, Duncan, he's now a friend, said that our job as product managers is to make sure that we don't build stupid things. It's amazing. Like, it's one of the most controversial definitions that I heard about it, but it's making sure that we don't build stupid things. And as PMs, we must put in place a process that helps to eliminate the bad ideas before they reach the development phase. It's a set of tools, principles, maybe a mindset that we have that helps us to validate ideas. And I think that's exactly what product discovery is all about.
Can we say that product discovery is about reducing risk or mitigating risk during the process?
It's exactly that. I always use this example as well. Like, I don't know if you've seen when Microsoft released Windows 1995, there was this video that you had Bill Gates and I think it was Steve Ballmer on stage dancing a song.
Yeah, I've seen it.
From the Rolling Stones, Satisfaction, and they were like jumping and dancing. And I always say that they were so happy because they probably took 2 years to build Windows 1995. But at that moment, there weren't this type of lean approach, ways of validating products so early. So I'm sure that they were so happy because it was actually quite a popular and a good operating system. But if you see right now, we have tons of tools in place. Like, we have tons of ways of validating hypotheses through surveys, A/B testings, fake doors, so many techniques that are described in the books that we can make use of to manage that risk very early.
Yeah, I think it's very risky. I mean, it's a kind of warning or alarm when you see people celebrating delivery instead of impact or like outcome. I mean, it happened to me like hundreds of times. I'm pretty sure it happened to you as well. When you are like super happy that you actually have delivered something and there are not so many bugs in the previous deploy, instead of celebrating the impact you're having on metrics. But when we do a lot of training, as you know, on both on individuals and companies. And when we train companies on product discovery, the most asked questions are usually two. The first one is, how do I know I need to do it? The second one is when. So the first one is, how do I know how to do it? The second one is, when is it better to do it? So how would you frame it? How would you reply?
Marco, I really like a story that Gibson Biddle, the VP of product at Netflix, the former VP of product at Netflix, because he's not there anymore, told once. He said that when he joined Netflix, he asked the CEO, Reed Hastings, about his vision for the product. Reed Hastings' answer was that only leaders like Steve Jobs have a sense of what customers actually seek. But he didn't. So he said that they would need consumer science to get there. Consumer science, he was referring to product discovery, A/B testings, everything that we put in place when actually running product discovery. So maybe this story helps to answer the first question, right? Like if you're running a company, you're a CEO and you're not Steve Jobs, then you'd better adopt a product discovery process to validate your hypothesis through quantitative and qualitative data, service, A/B testings, that kind of mechanisms. Regarding the second question, it was when it's better to do it. I believe that for pre-product market fit companies or products, adopting a lean approach, it's a must because you need to be very agile at changing direction, pivoting your MVP in order to find product market fit. Uh, but regardless of the phase of the company, I believe in product discovery as a continuous process for all product life cycles, let's say. And if you look back into the first articles about product discovery, you'll find that it was kind of the term was coined in between Chef Patton and Marty Kagan. They started talking about product discovery, but also they started talking about dual track. I think that the dual track it's a very good way of framing this. It's two tracks that happen at the same time. It's discovery and delivery that it's working in parallel. So circling back to what I said in the beginning, in the first track, we are trying to make sure that we are solving the right problems. Whereas in the delivery track, once you identified which is a problem worth solving, you're making sure that you deliver it on time. I think we still celebrate that we deliver something and it's not buggy, everything went well, and it's okay because it's not an easy job on itself. But yeah, we should celebrate on outcomes. We should actually celebrate once we release and after a couple of weeks or months when we realize that we are actually hitting our objectives, the objectives that we propose ourselves to hit, to move the needle of that metrics.
Yeah, I remember very well when I read for the first time about dual track because it was crazy. I mean, it was my path in which I was trying to understand what a PM, had to do because obviously I had no clue at all. Being in Italy, in Sicily, there was no, it's like everyone our age, more or less. And then you started to read svpg.com, in which they actually were saying, okay, there is something you can do that is a dual track. But I remember it took me a lot of time, like a lot of months, to figure out the timing. So how to, and if having a unified backlog, because at the end of the day, the team were small. So in my case, we needed to manage product discovery with a certain amount of time of the same team. So at the end of all the experiments, I thought it was better to have a unified backlog for product discovery and product delivery, even if you were managing, on separate tracks. Do you have any notes on that?
Yeah, I think that product discovery on itself is usually a messy process. We as PMs try to make it seem that it looks like dual track, then you find evidence for one of your ideas, you feel comfortable, you mitigated the risk, then you move it to product delivery. But it's very uncertain by nature. You'll never know what you're going to, which of your ideas are going to be successful or not. And you never know when picking an hypothesis when you're going to gain evidence to support them, right? That's why I think that structuring this process is very important. I think I haven't seen any book that it's actually very pragmatic, the classic how-to book that says, okay, let's say that you're starting on a new team, you know the theory about product discovery, you know the methodology, but how do you actually organize this? So I'm going to mention how we do it at 1026, specifically my team, because different teams adopt this in different ways, even if there's kind of a standardized ways of doing product discovery, and I'll tell you. So we have two backlogs. One is for product discovery, and the second one is for product delivery. The product discovery one, it's pretty cool because it's connected to a global product report. So you can see from all the different teams and the product teams at N26 are very, very, very large. I would say the product organization has around 70, 80 professionals working, PMs, basically. So you can see which are the ideas that we do have, which are the prioritized ones, and which are the ones that got evidence, and therefore we are going to take them to the delivery track. It's also very important to include the metric, or in our case, we work with OKRs as a way of measuring progress towards our vision, let's say, or our objectives. I think it's very important at the time of writing a ticket on the discovery backlog to understand which is the metric that we pretend to impact with that initiative. That's on one side. How do we know that a ticket is done? We usually use, going back to Marty Kagan, we use Marty Kagan's product opportunity assessment. So we usually start with the problem space. We explore the problem space. We try to understand which are the customer problems. Once we validated that there's a problem that customers really have, and we validate it with different users, why they have it, when do they have it, etc., then we move into solution mode. I try to make a very big difference between problem space and solution space, because it's very tempting to move immediately to the solution space, but actually we need to spend a lot of time on the problem space. But yeah, that's the way we actually structure our product discovery process. We start with the problem, we continue with possible solutions. With those solutions, we try to gain evidence. Our goal is to get evidence that we are moving in the right way and we found the right problem to solve. And only when we have the evidence, that's when we are going to move to delivery. Apart from the typical Scrum ceremonies, probably all teams have, like the stand-up, the grooming session, the planning session, the retro. We also have a discovery cadence where we go on a weekly meeting, and it's more of an exploratory moment where we come up with different hypotheses that we want to validate. As I said, they are mostly focused on the problem space.
So how do you prioritize all the hypotheses, all the discovery tickets with the metrics you have, the metrics you want to move in the discovery backlog? Do you do it during this weekly meeting?
No.
Or during the grooming, normal grooming?
Exactly. Usually during grooming and planning. For the discovery ideas, we prioritize them during the discovery meeting. For the delivery stuff, we prioritize it more on the grooming and the planning. And how we prioritize product discovery ideas, we have, of course, different dimensions. We try to see which is the size of the opportunity, our confidence level. So confidence, it's another way of talking about risk. When you don't have confidence, there's risk. When you have a lot of confidence, there's less risk. So if you think of classic prioritizing methodologies like RISE, the C is confidence, and it's basically the risk, and it's basically what we try to manage in the product discovery process.
Yeah, I like the way in which you describe the process by starting to say that is a messy process, because the biggest difference I found between guys like you who are doing product discovery and guys who just read books or they are fantasizing about product discovery is that the second ones think that there is a clear separation between the hypothesis risky phase and then the solution phase. Like you build an MVP and then there is a moment in which you 100% know that you can build a solution, or you did a cycle of customer interviews and you know 100% that okay, you can move forward building an MVP, while at the end is very, very tricky. I mean, during my path, never happened that you build an MVP, you are like, okay, we got it. We can 100%, we have 100% confidence that we are going to nail it. What's your take on this?
The first comment I would say is that we are never 100% sure. There's a graph called the curve of truth, the curve of truth. Basically, in that graph, there are two axes. One is effort, and the other one is accuracy of the evidence that you have. So usually the more effort that you put on an initiative, that would result in more accuracy of the evidence that we have. So for example, we have an idea. If we put all the effort and we build it and we take 6 months building it and we release it, that's going to be our moment of truth, because we're going to see whether users use it or not. But our role as PMs is not putting a lot of effort, but rather managing the effort that you put in order to achieve more evidence. So really good PMs will put very little effort and they will have a fair amount of confidence. And how you can do that? Let's say, Marco, you came up with an idea today, and that idea probably it's in the fantasy world because it hasn't been proved. And then what do? Like something really quick that you can do is you can talk with an SME or specialist. Like even like the most basic validation by an SME, it's already kind of an evidence. Then something that will take a little bit more of effort would be sending a survey, because you need to prepare the survey. It takes time to receive the answers, but then you have probably 100 answers from your customers at least. And you have like the holy grail of customer feedback in order to understand if you're actually solving a good problem. But I would say, like, going to percentages, if you talk with a specialist or an SME, you have like 5% of confidence. If you talk with your customers and they validated your policies, then you have like 20% of confidence. If you run a fake door or a Wizard of Oz experiment, you have like 50, 60, 70% of confidence. A Wizard of Oz would basically be, or on a fake door, they are very similar. It's basically faking that you have a certain functionality and seeing how many users actually try to use that functionality. That would be the fake door. And the Wizard of Oz is actually showing the functionality as if it was totally automated, but behind the scenes, there's a manual process, right? There's different level of efforts of the experiments that you can run with different evidence levels. So a good PM would take very little time in order to validate that there's a problem worth solving.
Yeah, one of my obsession, for example, is speed. Because by following what you're saying is that having the minimum effort to have the most reduction of risk, or to get most of the confidence. And what I found is that if you are not fast enough, at a certain point you need to take that risk, because let's say you have a certain deadline. If you are not fast enough to validate it with a small amount of effort, at a certain point it's too late. And so when I was working in small startup, especially dealing with very big ego CEOs, they were saying, okay, it's too late, we need to do it, it has to be perfect, so let's do what I'm saying. While if you spend most of your time at the beginning going very fast in different iterations, then you have the proof. Because product discovery in a very product-driven company as N26, I would say is much easier than in most like B2B sales company, in which you have to do a lot of stakeholder management in order to persuade them that even if you don't have the product right at the very first release, it's okay. And actually you got evidence that your product is useful. But can you tell me something, and then we'll get to the next question, about stakeholder management on product discovery? So you have to deal with people. There is like think that product discovery is just wasting time.
Yeah, and I get your point, because working in a product-driven company makes it easy for us PMs, because we don't have to do the work of evangelization, let's say, of the practice. Like in a product-driven company, it's gonna be easy to tell your stakeholders, "Hey, I'm gonna run an experiment to understand whether this is a problem worth solving," and people will understand, and they will have a shared language. It's easy when you're trying to implement product practices in a company that already has a product mindset. But yeah, it's a big challenge, and I've been there as well. I've been in more traditional companies where trying to implement product discovery feels like a waste of time. So what I usually do in those cases is trying to tell them with a lot of passion and enthusiasm about these practices, and use very concrete examples. Like the fake door, it's very powerful as a way of showing the value of product discovery. So if you think of Dropbox case, they didn't even wrote a line of code in order to validate that their product was going to be appealing. They created this video, they published it. In the video, you could see how the product was going to work, which basically was cloud technology, which was a little bit complex at the time, but very simplified. So they kind of democratized cloud technology because they added a new folder on your desktop, but the only difference was that the files in this folder they weren't saved in your computer. They were actually saved in the cloud. It was an aha moment for tons of potential customers. They signed up for it, and they, in a matter of days, they had a massive list of people who wanted to use this product. A way I implemented fake doors in previous experiences, it was in a video streaming company. We were building product for kids. It was videos and games for kids. The company was Cartoon Network, right? And then at that moment, we were trying to have more customer frequency, meaning that we wanted kids to watch more videos. We said, okay, which are the possible reasons by which kids are not watching that much videos as we would like? And we said, okay, I remember there were a couple of stakeholders who said, probably kids, when they go to school, they commute in the car with their parents, and they won't watch long form videos because it consumes a lot of your cell phone data. So we should build something like download to go, like this feature that Netflix has. We started analyzing how long it would take to implement it. And because in the video streaming world, there's a lot of restrictions on how you distribute certain content and make sure that this content cannot be downloaded and it's protected and encrypted, we realized that we had to use a third-party technology, and we started to look into implementation times. I would take 6 months in order to implement download to go. So what we did was, I said to these guys, hey, what if we placed the button of download to go just as if it was there, and then when the users click there, we say, hey, we are working on this feature. If you want to know when we are going to release it, please click here. With this, you have a very interesting thing, because you get to deliver an experiment that takes less than 1 week to develop, because it's basically a button and a form. You'll get to see which is the real intention from users to actually use that feature. After a couple of weeks of running the experiment, we realized that only 2% if I recall correctly, it was 2% of the kids wanted to use download to go. And from those 2%, only 10% wanted to receive a notification when this feature was available. So with that, we got like very valuable information that helped to inform our decision process. And we decided not to move forward with this, because if we really had taken 6 months to implement this feature, but only 2% of the users would like to use it, that would be a total failure.
That's super interesting, and I love all the story and the framing. One of the comment that I used to receive on this kind of approach is, okay, but don't users get pissed off because actually they think there is a feature but they are not getting it. But at the end of the day, we understood that users are more, willing to help you than what you think actually. So they want their product to get better. And once you ask for their help, it's kind of okay being part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good way of framing this is, yes, we are actually putting some intentional friction. So you're generating friction to your customers, but it's going to be in a very, very short time period until you get the evidence that you were looking for, and you get very valuable information out of it. So again, it's intentional friction that you are putting in place for a short time period, and in exchange for that friction that you generate, you get massive insights from your customers. So I think it's worth it.
Yeah, and getting back to your team, so who's involved in the product discovery process and why?
Everyone in the team is involved. And when I say everyone, I mean, of course, PMs, of course, UX researchers, product designers to build wireframes, engineers. They are really embedded into this process. Sometimes we need to run a tech spike to understand if we can build something. Data analysts. So I think that the more that we adopt the product mindset and the product discovery mindset, and we start looking into hypotheses as opportunities that we have, and we want to understand whether we should build them or not, then the whole team is bringing their very own point of view, their different thinking hat. Some of them are going to look into the problem from a technical standpoint. Someone from business is going to look at this from, okay, is it viable? So you're going to have the classic viability mindset. You're going to have the feasibility mindset, like, can we build it? You're going to have this desirability and usability mindset, which is, okay, I'm happy if we can build it and if it brings money to the business, but are we actually generating value for the customer? Is it going to be desirable? And what's more, is it going to be usable? Are they going to understand how to use it?
Can you explain for the public what a spike is?
Yeah, of course. A technical spike, it's technical. Number one, it means that it's a task that we put in our backlogs in order to understand better from a technology standpoint whether we can build something with our current technology stack or not, and which are going to be the main challenges or roadblocks. Is it going to be the number of dependencies? Do we need to build something very big, or maybe it's better to get it from a third party? So that's basically it. It's looking at a technical uncertainty and trying to get more certainty after a certain period of time.
Honestly, the first time engineers told me, okay, we need to run a spike, and they asked them, okay, what's a spike? So we need to write code in order to understand how to write code. I told them, okay, you're crazy. We're not going to do this because why do we need to waste lines of code? And they told me, actually, you know what? You're going to waste a lot, like order or magnitude more lines of code if we don't do spikes. And they just persuade me like in 30 seconds. So we already talked about the continuous discovery process you use in your company. Why? Because you have two different backlog, you run dual track. Do you have any tips on how to implement by starting from zero to get to like a continuous discovery process, habit, or however you wanna call it.
So let's say you're in a company that it's been mainly focused on delivery. You basically always know what to build, and you have a prototype list, and then you just go code it and deliver it. So the first thing is making the mindset change and finding value in product discovery. So you probably went through the different books and different talks and podcasts, and you heard about product discovery. So how to implement it? I think maybe the very best idea is starting with a backlog of ideas and treating ideas as something that needs to be validated. So you have a backlog of ideas, and then you have your delivery backlog. Usually, the delivery backlog, we use typical engineering tools like Jira or GitLab or that kind of software. For discovery ideas, you can even use Trello. So whenever someone has an idea, the CEO, someone from sales, someone from marketing have an idea, you put their ideas, and you have them there, and you treat them as hypotheses that need to be validated. If you do that and you work in parallel looking into new opportunities but also delivering, you're already doing product discovery. You can get better at it, of course. You can find better ways of validating early your ideas. You can implement a weekly meeting with your team to look into the different hypotheses. There are several things that you can do. But even my recommendation would be to start with baby steps. Just by having a backlog and treating ideas as such, as something that needs to get validated before getting into delivery, you'll start doing product discovery. And believe me, it only gets better.
Before you mentioned two words that are product mindset, and this is something we are working a lot on Product Heroes in order to convey this idea to people. So what is product mindset for you?
Product mindset, it's knowing that not all ideas are going to be successful. So when you inherently know that this is a fact, then everything that you'll do is going to be driven by this statement, let's say. So you'll treat ideas as hypotheses. You'll treat deliveries as experiments that you need to validate, and you're going to pursue outcomes. It's going to be natural because you change completely the game from I know what to do, I just need to build it fast, to I'm not sure what is the right thing to do, therefore I need to understand how to do it. But ultimately, the overarching thing that I'm trying to impact is a metric. So I'm going to look for problems that will help me to move that metric.
Cool. So what was your biggest mistake? I mean, the mistake that gave you the biggest learning.
Oof, so many. But maybe in terms of product discovery, I'll take the main theme of the conversation as which was the biggest learning I had in product discovery. I think one of the typical mistakes people do, and I had to go through it as well, was actually spending more time on doing research to validate an idea than the time it would take to actually build it. So sometimes you are so focused on having evidence that you'll make an impact that you'll spend more time doing research than actually going and building it. So you need to be very aware of which is the development effort to do something, and everything that you do should be less than that time. There's a book called Just Enough Research. I think that title,
Just enough research.
yeah, it's pretty cool to see that you don't need to reach a level of confidence of 100%, as you said before, right? You need to gain a certain level of confidence in order to be able to take a decision. But at the end of the day, it's we are running against time. Companies, startups, go through funding rounds and they raise money. And by raising money, they gain time. You have a runway of 2 years, 3 years. Okay, that's the time you have to make an impact. So the faster you move, the better. So also be very conscious of research is going to take X time. Okay, cool. And sometimes building something in a hacky way, it's going to take much less time. My recommendation there is to have an agreement with your engineers saying, hey, I know that as engineers, by nature, you want to have like a very clean code without technical depth. But our agreement is we'll experiment and we'll introduce hacky code and dirty code to move very fast. If the experiment doesn't work, if it's not successful, then we'll throw away that code. But if it's successful, my commitment as a PM is that we'll assign time on the next sprints to actually do it properly, to pay that technical debt that we incurred in order to gain an insight.
If you had to leave just one piece of advice to someone who's becoming a PM, who wants to become a PM, would it be?
Curiosity, it's something that it's a trait that every PM should have. So never undervalue the curiosity. And with curiosity, I mean, start learning, start attending courses, start reading books of product management and best practices. That's on one side, but also curiosity about your product. Which are the burning questions that you have about your product? Sometimes I tell people, try to think as if you were the owner of this product, the real founder of this company, because sometimes when you read a lot about product management, you adopt a position which is a little bit risk averse. You try to gain evidence, but at the same time, try to speak with your customers and understand which are the real pain points that customers have, and try to move really fast. My tip would be always keep this holy curiosity. Also learn about the industry. Maybe a mistake that I used to do or used to have was spending a lot of time on reading product management books, which is okay, but also try to learn and focus as well on learning about the industry that you are working on. So if you are working in fintech, okay, read about the regulations, read the API manual of one of your providers, read not only product management content because it's very tempting, it's very entertaining, but also read the news, understand your competitors, what they are doing, which is their strategy. Try to analyze that competitive landscape. Try to understand how you with your product are going to thrive and be successful.
Thank you very much, Guido. You've been great. I think there are a lot of insights in this interview. And I think our listeners will get a lot of value. So thank you very much and hope to see you soon in Italy soon.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you. And I'd be happy to visit you and go for a birra.
Grande.
I owe you some beers, by the way.
Ciao Guido, thank you very much.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Grazie per aver ascoltato questo episodio di Product Heroes. Se l'hai trovato utile, iscriviti su YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, insomma, dove ascolti i tuoi podcast normalmente, così non ti perderai neanche un episodio. Prima di andare via, vota con 5 stelline questo podcast o scrivi un commento o una recensione. Questo ci aiuterà a raggiungere sempre più persone e quindi aumentare la diffusione della cultura di prodotto in Italia, che poi è la nostra mission finale. Quindi il podcast è soltanto uno dei tanti modi che Product Heroes utilizza per spingere la cultura di prodotti. Trovi maggiori informazioni e tutte le attività che svolgiamo su ProductHeroes.it e soprattutto non perderti l'appuntamento più importante che stiamo spingendo negli ultimi mesi, che è la Product Heroes Conference, che sarà a Milano il 6 ottobre 2023. Anche su questo trovi tutte le info su ProductHeroes.it. Ciao e alla prossima!